Everything you thought you knew about travel in North America? Yeah, forget it. Because there were 3 decades that changed everything, and barely anyone talks about them. From ancient indigenous trade routes that were more advanced than some European systems, to the wild freedom of Route 66 in its prime. And finally, the digital explosion that turned van lifers into modern nomads. North America didn't just grow, it morphed. Each decade told a different story about who we were, where we were going, and how we got there. Today, we're diving into 3 unforgettable decades that completely reshaped how people journeyed across this massive continent. Here's the thing. People always talk about how America was built, or how Canada expanded west, or how Mexico evolved through revolution and reform. But what they don't talk about is how travel, real, raw, boots-on-the-ground movement, shaped culture. The challenge? We've lost touch with the stories of people who crossed deserts, mountains, and cities before us. Most of these journeys are buried in textbooks no one reads, or they've been sugar-coated into tourism slogans. Let's fix that. Because whether you were an indigenous trader on a canoe route in the 1400s, a Dust Bowl survivor heading west in the 1930s, or a solo traveler chasing Wi-Fi from Canada to Baja California in the 2010s, you were part of something way bigger than a road trip. Let's break down the 3 decades that define North American travel in ways nobody ever really explains. Long before any European set foot on this continent, North America was already a massive web of connected trade routes. People imagine pre-Columbian America as scattered tribes living in isolation. That's wrong. Totally wrong. The reality? It was connected. It was busy. People were moving, constantly. And they weren't just surviving. They were thriving. Take the Mississippian culture. These were people who built massive cities like Cahokia. Yes, actual cities, not just camps, with pyramids, public plazas, and organized streets. Cahokia had a population of over 40,000 people around the year 1100. That's more than London at the same time. They didn't stay put. Mississippians traded shells from the Gulf Coast, copper from the Great Lakes, obsidian from the Rockies. There were trails, river routes, and portages that connected the entire continent, from the Atlantic to the Pacific, from the Arctic to Central America. One major route? The Hopewell Interaction Sphere, an insanely complex network that moved goods, culture, and ideas between groups from what's now New York to Nebraska to Florida. People used dugout canoes, carried goods across mountains, navigated rivers by the stars, and traded everything from turquoise and tobacco to stories and rituals. It wasn't just about stuff. It was about relationships, alliances, communication. Think of it like the Silk Road, but North American. And then came the outsiders. When the Spanish showed up in the 1500s, they were shocked. Hernando de Soto's expedition came across huge road systems, busy towns, people who already had ways to navigate terrain that Europeans couldn't handle without a guide. These weren't wild, empty lands. They were alive. That decade, the 1400s, was the last one before colonization shattered these networks. But for that moment it was a peak, a high point of human movement long before highways or maps. Fast forward 500 years. Now we're in the middle of the Great Depression. The 1930s were brutal. Crops failed, banks collapsed, and the Dust Bowl turned entire towns into dead zones. Families packed everything they owned onto rickety trucks and hit the road, not for adventure, but to survive. Thousands of families became road migrants, heading west to California in search of work. The highways were rough, the cars overheated constantly, and every motel was a gamble. Still, people moved. Route 66 became the symbol of this movement. Opened just a few years earlier in 1926, Route 66 cut across the country from Chicago to Los Angeles. It quickly turned into a lifeline. It wasn't paved all the way, it was dusty, dangerous, full of breakdowns and disappointment, but it gave people a path, a direction. You had people like the Jodes from the Grapes of Wrath, based on real stories, forced to leave Oklahoma and Arkansas, driving west because they had no other choice. Along the way, they camped in fields, drank water from ditches, and begged for work. But here's the thing, even in that mess, something started to change. Gas stations popped up, roadside diners opened, little motels with neon signs gave people a tiny sense of rest. The road itself became a place, not just a way to get somewhere, but a life. It was the start of the American car culture, the beginning of the idea that freedom could be found behind the wheel. And by the end of the 1930s, the roads were better, stronger, smoother. The foundation was set for everything that came after, from road trips to RVs to truck stops. That decade taught North America how to move on 4 wheels, even when you had nothing left. Now we jump to something recent, the 2010s. A decade you probably lived through, but maybe didn't realize how much travel changed during it. In the 2010s, North America saw a total rebirth of the traveler. But this time, it wasn't pioneers or farmers, it was digital nomads. People who ditched cubicles to work from laptops. People who lived in vans, Airbnbs, and coffee shops from Vancouver to Tulum. What made it all possible? Wi-Fi, smartphones, Instagram, and remote jobs that let you work from anywhere with a charger and a half-decent signal. Places like Sedona, Joshua Tree, Tofino, Tulum. They became hotspots not because of industry or farming but because they were vibe destinations. YouTubers made van life cool, Instagram made hiking trails go viral, and cities had to adapt, public libraries boosted internet, cafes became co-working spaces, and suddenly, crossing the continent was easier than ever. But with one weird catch. You didn't need to stay anywhere. You could live on the road. That freedom wasn't cheap. Most digital nomads had to hustle, juggling freelance gigs, side hustles, and patchy Wi-Fi. But they changed what it meant to live in North America. The borderless traveler wasn't a rich backpacker or a corporate exec. It was a 29-year-old copywriter in a van, or a coder living in Airbnbs, or a photographer bouncing from Alberta to Oaxaca. It was the most open decade North America ever had for travel, until 2020 hit, and everything paused. And that's what makes these 3 decades unforgettable. In the 1400s, people traveled for connection. In the 1930s, they traveled out of desperation. In the 2010s, they traveled for freedom. Each time, movement wasn't just about getting somewhere. It was about surviving, thriving, and finding purpose. The roads changed, the vehicles changed, but the reason people moved, that stayed raw and real. North America has always been on the move. But if you really want to understand it, not just the borders, but the soul of the continent, you have to look at how people traveled, not just where they went, but why. Those 3 decades, centuries apart, show us something powerful. No matter what the world throws at us, we find a way forward on foot, by road through the cloud. If you enjoy our journey, please like and subscribe to our channel, and if you like our content and want to support me, you are welcome to buy me a coffee. The link is in the description box below.